You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
You're listening to the Dave Bullis Podcast.
Episode of Dave Bullis Podcast. Joining me today is Eli Regalado, who is the Chief of Madness at the Mad Hatter Agency, where he shows clients how to leverage and build their businesses, and they also specialize in growth hack marketing. In the past year, Eli has raised over $400,000 through various crowdfunding platforms. Eli, sir, how are you?
I'm doing well. Yourself?
Pretty good, thank you.
Excellent.
So Eli, just to jump right into this, could you give us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah. Let's see here. So I'm going to give you the nickel tour. Got out of high school, started a construction company because that's what my dad did, and I'm half Mexican, so I figured, what else am I going to do? Was successful at that, sold that company off, started a commercial construction company doing commercial bars and nightclubs in Denver, Colorado. Got out of that business and went to work for a .com called Service Magic. Had a huge exit. Had a really big company buy us. Started a competitor company and sold that. And then I started doing basically a service I call influencer capital consulting. And what I would do as a hired gun. So people would hire me to reach out to people like Steve Wozniak or Vince Cerf and Larry Roberts, two of the four internet creators, or Jimmy Wales, the founder of Wikipedia. And they'd say, hey, I need to interview this guy, or I want to talk to him about being on our board, or I want to involve them in a project, etc. So I was on a plane 3 out of 4 weeks, and it was my job to basically go around, meet these people, and then tie them into these projects somehow, way, shape, or form. On those travels, I met a guy by the name of Scott Case, who is the CEO of the Startup America Partnership. He introduced me to the folks over at Indiegogo, and I heard about this thing called crowdfunding, and I was like, that's kind of cool, you know, what is it? And I'd been an entrepreneur most of my life, so I was very familiar with the struggles that came with raising capital. And so I learned about what this was, and they really kind of took me by the hand and gave me a lot of the kind of like backdoor, kind of like, here's how you set up campaigns, and this is why you do this, and this is why you don't do that type stuff. And the biggest thing that they always said was, you know, you got to focus on a pre-launch. And of course, you know, at this point, I had several of my own companies. I know marketing. I know digital marketing. I was like, you know, who needs to do a pre-launch? So we launched our first campaign, and it was a friend of mine who basically created a plastic straw that you could drink coffee with, and it wouldn't melt in your coffee. Now, I didn't think straws melted, but even if they don't physically melt, they're leaching chemicals into your drink, which is like all kinds of nasty, toxic stuff that you're pouring into your body. So we ended up raising $18,000 for a plastic straw. And I was like, well, hell, if I can raise money for a plastic straw, I could probably raise money for anything. So then I picked up my first real legit crowdfunding client at this time, and he had a little toy that basically you hook up and you can make little Lego type creations, and you can control them with your iPhone. And we raised $183,000 for that project. And the difference was, one had a pre-launch that lasted several months on building a community, showcasing it to different meetups, you know, getting influencers in these different Lego communities and whatnot, samples that they could play with, and then really leveraging that momentum and dumping it into the campaign when it went live.
Cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of.
I'm sorry, I thought you dropped out there for a second.
Yeah, no worries. So that's my background, and that's how I got started.
Oh, excellent. You know, that straw, I actually heard about that straw, by the way.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, you know, I never actually thought about it, but I was like, man, they're right. Because if you do put the straw in there, you never know what is actually slowly leaking out. And it's not just, you know, the first time. It's like over time, you're constantly using a straw. So it's not, you know, it's not like one time. It's like hundreds of times. You know what I mean? So it's like it builds up in your body.
Yeah. Might as well just drink a gallon of radiator fluid.
So you know, it's pretty cool. cool that you worked on that. So then now that you work at Mad Hatter and you actually you do this full time. I wanted to pick your brain about a couple of things, and one of which is, what are some of the biggest mistakes that you see when you see like a client or even someone's crowdfunding campaign? What are some of the biggest mistakes that you keep seeing like over and over again?
Yeah, I mean, biggest mistakes are no pre-launch. And what I mean by pre-launch, for those of you guys who maybe this is a little bit foreign to or new to, a pre-launch is warming up the community, usually online, in advance for an upcoming raise. And so that's the best way to do that is with a content marketing strategy. An easy way to do this is write down 30 questions that commonly come up about your product or your industry or your niche or something that your film covers. So if there's not 30 problems, it's 30 questions. So 30 things, right? And then you write 30 blog posts, and those blog post titles are the questions that you're answering, and the blog is the answer. Now, if you guys are more into film, those can all be YouTube videos. And then what you can do with those YouTube videos is extract the audio, and now you have 30 videos and 30 podcasts. You can even hire someone to transcribe these things for literally pennies, and then that becomes your blog post. So if you just start doing that and start pushing this content out, and as long as you have something decent to say, people will start following you, and you can take those followers and dump them into the campaign. So lack of a proper pre-launch is number one. Lack of a cohesive message. Cohesive is kind of a big word. So what I mean by that is like, what the hell are you trying to do, right? A lot of people just want to raise money for raising money's sake, and they say, oh, I'm going to launch this product or do this film or make this record just cause and give me money. Well, that's not really a hook, right? So there needs to be a problem that you're solving in the marketplace, or it needs to dramatically change someone's life for the better, because that's when people will give you money, is when they can see that what you're doing is of value to humanity or themselves. Or if it, sometimes if you can really knock it out of the park, it's a combination of both. And then the inability to clearly and concisely explain your idea in one sentence. So most people say, oh, what are you working on? And they take 20 minutes to kind of get around to it. That is a very, very, very bad place to be, because if you can't understand it and explain it simply, the media won't and the crowd won't. And 9 times out of 10, they're going to put you in the, we'll get to this later, or I just don't care box, which is where you don't want to be. So those are the 3 biggest things I see. Oh, if there's a fourth would be everybody putting all of their effort into social media, and none into niche or mainstream PR. So social media is good for branding and awareness. It isn't necessarily as good for conversions. What drives most conversions are articles either on niche blog posts. So these are, let's just say, I don't know, Roger Ebert's blog, and if he were still alive, right? Mm-hmm. Or your local news or CNN or whoever, right? So niche and mainstream press will drive more conversions than all of the social media you got.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. And a couple of weeks ago, I had Jason Brubaker on, and he actually mentioned the importance of an email list. And he keeps making sure that, above all else, he always makes sure he gets that email address, and then he puts that on a list. And when he's ready to, start a crowdfunding campaign or what have you, he always has that list to draw back on. Mm-hmm. And rather than throwing all the eggs in the basket of social media. So, by the way, Eli, just out of curiosity, have you ever crowdfunded for a film?
No.
Okay. Have you ever thought about it?
Yeah, actually. So I have a good friend who's a director, and he's got a film that he wants to crowdfund. So we've been talking about doing some crowdfunding for his new film.
That's very cool, because you've actually already made some very, very good tips, by the way, specifically about going to YouTube and then extracting that audio, and now you have YouTube videos, and now you have audio for a podcast. That's already a tip. I'm probably going to steal that, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely.
So as you start to make a campaign, what are some of like the tips and the tricks that you like to use, or if you want to use the word hacks that you use to actually make sure the campaign is fully utilized and it's fully primed and ready to go. So when you finally the three phases, the soft launch, the preparing, and the final launch of it.
Yeah, well, the first thing that I like to do is say, who is the target market? And the target market, when I say, people say, oh, it's people who like movies. Well, that's a really bad target market. Or it's people who like war films. That doesn't even really do it either, right? So a target market is men between the ages of 22 to 35 who like war films, who like Saving Private Ryan, who like, shooter games, and who are really big into the historical elements, right? Mm-hmm. They enjoy watching Top Gear, and you're basically building out a profile on who your ideal prospect is. That is the same tone that you need to take when it comes to writing your blog posts, when it comes to making your videos on YouTube, when it comes time to extracting that audio and making your podcasts, right? Mm-hmm. So it's all about putting those target markets in place and speaking directly to them. So that's first and foremost. Once you get that, then it's really starting, to really build that audience and build the tribe, right? So, and I'm assuming most of your listeners are filmmakers, correct?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So let's just say, I'm assuming a lot of these guys are going to have YouTube channels, and if you don't, definitely get one. Because we use YouTube quite a bit in our marketing for our own organization, and it pays off in spades for the amount of effort you put in and the benefits you reap. It's not even a comparison. So, give you an example. Here's a tip right here. So, my keyword that I want to be found under is crowdfunding consultant. So what I did is I went to Google Keyword Tool. And just Google it. Just type in Google Keyword Tool. And you can go in there and you can type in different keywords and you can see what it is that people are searching for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
Okay. So I knew crowdfunding consultant was big up there, right? And so I said, well, hey, what I'm going to do is when someone goes to YouTube and types crowdfunding consultant, I want to make sure I show up on the first page, right? So I just typed in crowdfunding consultant and I have 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. So I have 4 results on the first page, and I have the first spot, the third spot, and the fourth spot. That took me probably, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks to get. Now, if you're trying to do this from an SEO perspective and getting your web pages to rank in that same format, you'd have to hire an SEO expert or give yourself 6 months to even come close to that. And so with this key term, I got 4 of those top listings within a matter of weeks. So here's the secret. Are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready to hear it.
Okay, cool. So in your title, you want to have your keyword first, and you want to put it in quotes. So mine is crowdfunding consultant. So I say, quote, crowdfunding consultant, end quote. Then I have my title. How a $250,000 Kickstarter failure turned into a $650,000 success, right? That's my title. And then my next title, can you take a guess what it's going to start with?
Crowdfunding consultant?
Crowdfunding consultant. Third title, can you guess what it's going to start with?
Crowdfunding consultant.
You got it, right? So now when anyone searches that key term, they're going to see me. And they're going to see me one right after the other. So it takes an average of 5 to 7 impressions for any consumer to do business with your brand. I don't know if you knew that or not. So when someone comes to the first page of Google and types in crowdfunding consultant, or when someone goes to Google and types in crowdfunding consultant and they present with the first page and they see my mug, time and time and time again, they're going to say, okay, who is this guy? He obviously knows what he's doing, right? And the cool thing is you don't have to get 1 million views on your YouTube. You just got to get enough of the right views to make it worth your while. Does that make sense?
Actually, yeah, it makes perfect sense.
Cool. So market to those people, use those key terms, put that keyword in your title with quotes, put it again, that keyword in your body, and you're going to be able to dominate YouTube on these different search strands. Okay, no one else really does it, so do it, and you're going to find success. Okay, so let's talk about some other tools here. Let's see here. Let's talk about BuzzSumo. Have you ever used BuzzSumo before?
Yeah, I have.
Okay. So BuzzSumo allows you basically just to plug in any key term, and then it's going to show you all the top blogs and outlets that are talking about it. So if I were to type in war films and hit go, it's going to show me all the posts on Huffington Post, etc., that have talked about that recently. Now, why that's important is if it makes sense for your keyword to go after, you can start adding these people to a list. You can start commenting on their blogs as they post it and start building a relationship, with the core group of these guys. Don't focus on trying to build a relationship with 100 people. Focus on like 10 to 20, where once a day you just look and see if they've posted something new. If they have, you comment, you leave some commentary, and then you start building the relationship very organic like that. 10 of the right placed articles for a crowdfunding campaign, you have a $100,000 campaign. 20, you're going to knock this thing out of the park. Okay?
Yeah, very cool.
All right. Socialbro, socialbro.com. Have you heard of it before?
Yeah, I have. I actually just installed Socialbro, the app for my Hootsuite platform.
Okay, cool. So Socialbro, as you know, is a very powerful Twitter engagement software. Now, for those of you who don't use Twitter, think of Twitter like this. It's a cocktail party. Everyone's talking, and you're just hearing all these conversations. What it allows you to do is to eavesdrop into what these people are talking about and then interject commentary when and if it makes sense. So let's just say that they I don't know. Let's just say, okay, for your podcast. Okay. So let's just say you want to market your podcast to filmmakers, right? Mm-hmm. What you can do is you can go in the Socialbro. You can type in discover new users, click on discover new users. In the bio information, you can just type the word filmmaker and hit search. And every single person on Twitter around the entire globe who has filmmaker in their description, you're going to see them. And then what you can do is you can click one other button that says add all to list. And by clicking add all to list, it'll take, let's just say there's 300,000 filmmakers on Twitter, right? Mm-hmm. It'll pull every single one of them into a list that you title filmmakers.
That's really cool. That's actually a really amazing hack.
Super, super effective. Now, the list title, you want to put attention filmmakers. And then in the description, you want to put a very quick call to action. And you want to say, I teach filmmakers how to raise money on Kickstarter, and put a link. Because what's going to happen is if I'm a filmmaker and you add me to a list, it's going to say, hey, Dave Bullis just added you to a list called filmmakers. And I'm going to say, or attention filmmakers. I'm going to say, what's that? Click. And then it's going to say, I teach filmmakers how to raise money for their films on Kickstarter. Click here to learn how. Click. Boom. I'm now on your podcast. That quick.
That's right. Eli, that is freaking awesome. That's another thing I'm going to have to steal from you.
Yeah, we got all kinds of stuff you can steal. So good stuff. Now, as you start, so if you did that and you got 300,000 people, there's a small percentage of them that are going to start following you right away, right? So as you're building that Twitter community, the reason I put more emphasis on Twitter than anything else is like your buddy said, he goes, I always try to get the email, right?
Yeah.
Email is usually a long-term strategy to get emails. It's a lot easier to get someone to follow you on Twitter than it is for them to give up their email. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to teach you another hack. So the next hack I'm going to teach you is called a mass DM direct message campaign. So let's just say you build up 5,000 filmmaker followers and you're going to launch a crowdfunding campaign and you're going to teach filmmakers how to raise money on Kickstarter, and it's going to be a course and it's going to be $25, but you've interviewed the top 10 filmmakers and how they did it, right? It's a step-by-step guide. Okay?
Okay.
That actually might be a cool product for you. You could probably do pretty easily. Yeah. So now you have, a couple thousand people following you on Twitter, and you want to tell all of them that, oh my gosh, my campaign is now live. Come give me money, right? Well, there's two ways of doing it. One, you can sit there and try to direct message all of them one by one. The other way is to run Twitter ads, or what you can do with Socialbro is you can run a direct message campaign, and you can send a direct message to every single one of those people that are following you with a link. Now, there's one exception. The link that you send will not be clickable because Twitter has enacted some link blockers to where they'll stop links that come through to avoid spam. You used to be able to use a shortened Google URL link, but then they just recently stopped that in like the last 2 weeks. So now what you can do is you can send a direct message, but instead of HTTP : do HTTP : // www, right? Mm-hmm. So all you did is you just added one extra backslash. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Okay,
so if you had 2, you're going to get blocked. If you had 3 backslash, I think it's a // but anyways, you get the point. 3 // that link will get by Twitter, and you'll be able to tell those people, say, hey, I just launched my course on how to raise money for your film. Copy and paste this link into your address bar. Tell me what you think. Right? And then those thousands of people get it all at once. You can also do the same thing with that list that you did. So attention filmmakers, right? So you can have one called filmmakers, quote, how to raise money. And then in the description say, I teach you it all here. And then you put that same link in that description. And then again, that goes out to this 300,000 because you, quote unquote, added them all to a list. So it's basically just a way of kind of hacking the traditional structure that Twitter has, but using it for, mass email marketing without having to get an email list.
And that is an awesome hack too. And I want to ask you, like, is there like a conversion benchmark that you found using this method?
I mean, it really, really, really depends, right? So when you say conversion, are we talking about clicks, or are we talking about conversions like with monetary conversions?
Just clicks.
Oh, with clicks? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if you get like a decent offer or a decent little pitch, you should be converting 1% to 3%. So I've had conversions as high as 10%.
Oh, wow.
So, but it all depends on what it is that you're telling, right? With you, if you were to run that piece and say, hey, I can teach you how to raise money on Kickstarter for your film, that would be a high conversion because it's a big need for these guys, right?
Yeah.
There's all kinds of films, but most of them are underfunded if they're funded at all. And if you're in the position where you can give these people money or help them get money, you're going to get a lot of people clicking on you.
Cool. Very cool. Because when I would run my campaigns, that's the number I always had was 1%. So I always thought to myself, if I need 1%, I know now a rough number that I can go off of. So how many people I'm going to have to ask? So if I am looking to get raise X amount of dollars, I figure out, okay, if each person, these people contributed $1 or whatever, I know now what I have to do. And it was a big number, but that's what I was pretty much preparing myself for.
Yeah. I mean, here's the thing, right? So it's just a math equation at the end of the day. A lot of people, they set out on these campaigns, but they don't do the math behind them. I say, well, hey, how much do you want to raise? And they say, oh, $200,000. And I say, okay, well, how much of a network do you have? None. How many people do you have working on this campaign with you? Not a person. How much time do you want to do on a pre-launch? 2 days. And so let's just break this down, right? So if you need $200,000 and the average conversion, let's just say, or the average backer gives you $100, right? And you just start doing the math. And all of a sudden you sit there and say, oh, I need several 100,000 page views before I'm going to hit that number. And if you don't have a strategy to get those people that are A, going to be interested in what it is you're selling, and B, going to be interested enough to where they're going to give you money beforehand. Because that's the other caveat with Kickstarter too, right? You're getting people to buy into this vision of something that's going to come as opposed to what's already here. It's easy to sell stuff that's already here because it's very transactional, right? Hey, yeah. See this? You like it? Click here to buy it. With Kickstarter, it's like, hey, you see this? It's coming. Click here to give me some money, and you're going to be part of this quote unquote tribe and this community that really brings this thing to market. So it's a different animal, and it requires a different sort of finesse on the front end as opposed to slap this thing together live and beg for money.
Yeah, Yeah, that's a very good point. And but that is a very good point also about the numbers too. And but that is definitely something I'm going to have to take into consideration. So what I've done now is I started making like a sort of like a rough outline of a plan that I could sort of put into anything, if you know what I mean. So I sort of have like ideas, and I sort of have I'm outlining it in Word, and I go through and I highlight URLs and this and that. So it would be like this all-encompassing plan that I could just easily transfer over to whatever film I'm working on.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. And is there any other tips or hacks you could share with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so next hack. So this is the Google Images hack. So the first thing you should do for any campaign is you should do a feasibility study. Don't let the word feasibility, scare you off. All you're wanting to do is look at other films on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. You want to look at a couple different things. You want to look at how much were they asking for? How much did they raise? What was their top perk, right? So what did people want more than anything? Was it a DVD? Was it whatever, right?
Yeah.
What was their average perk? So you say total number of backers divided by total amount raised, and you get the average perk, right? Mm-hmm. Or the average backer amount. Mm-hmm. And then you also want to say, did they get any media exposure for this? And that's either mainstream or niche blogs. Now, how in your mind, how would you find media how would you discover which media outlets wrote about a particular film for their campaign? Any guesses?
Obviously the first guess I would do is obviously do a Google search for a particular agency or a particular film, and then just try to sort of reverse engineer it.
Exactly. Okay, so we're just going to take it one step further and clean it up a little bit better, though. Okay, so what you want to do is you want to go to, let's say, Kickstarter.com, right? And I forget the name of the Spike Lee film, but there was one on there, right? Yeah. And so you go to where their video is, and instead of clicking play, you're going to hover over that image. You're going to right click, and you're going to click Save As, call it whatever, save the image as Spike Lee, and then you're going to save it to your desktop, right?
Okay.
Then you're going to go to Google Images. Okay, and it's going to present you with the search bar. You're going to minimize the window a little bit to where you can find the screenshot you just took, and it's saved to your desktop. You're going to drag that image and drop it under that search bar. And what Google's going to do is it's going to look for any instance that has that image on a blog or a piece of digital media. Okay. And then it's going to provide you with a list of every single blog that's written about that particular campaign.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah. So you do that with 10 campaigns and 10 films, and you're going to have a media list that's hypersensitive to what it is that you're doing. Because if chances are, if you have another film in the same genre as Spike Lee's, people are going to write about it because they want to know.
You know what I could see that really working too, Eli, is with like horror films, particularly like zombie films.
Yes, exactly. So if you guys are zombie film lovers, you're welcome. Merry Christmas.
Yeah, that would be a great, obviously, because, a lot of those blogs are specifically about, I actually shot a zombie trailer, and I didn't know this, but there was so many more zombie sites and blogs and Twitters, everything that I even imagined. And we were just, and they found us on Twitter, which is even more amazing. But with this hack, I could have found even more, which would have honestly at least doubled our efforts.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it allows you to, it's all a numbers game, right? So how much you raise is it in direct relation to how much marketing you do in the front side. And if you can connect with more communities and more writers and inform them about your campaign before it goes live, you're going to have better success. Okay. Let me talk about pitching real quick. When you're pitching the media, you want to start pitching 2 to 3 weeks before your campaign goes live. Now, they're not going to have a link to the campaign until you actually make it live, right? Mm-hmm. But what you're going to do is you're going to pitch them on what it is that you're doing, why they should care, and you're going to say you're going to request an embargo until the day and time that your campaign goes live. So the vernacular, it's common practice. You're just saying, hey, please embargo this. That means I'm giving you the scoop now, but please just shut up until launch date. And then as soon as I hit launch, I'm going to email everybody that said, yes, I'll write an article and I'll hold it until blank date. So your workflow is you press launch, you copy that link, you go to your email, and then you just email that link to all the reporters or bloggers that have said they're going to write about this film before it goes live.
Oh, cool. That is a very good strategy. And it also is, you mentioned talking to bloggers and reporters, et cetera, before it happens, before it launches, because I think a lot of bloggers now have become sort of inundated with, requests of, hey, we just launched today. Why don't you take a look at it? Or, we have 5 days left. Can you please, tweet about this or whatever?
Yeah. Well, I mean, think about this from a blogger. Bloggers care about two things, and they care about page views and money. Mm-hmm. And they try to get those page views and the money by telling stories. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if you come to them with a story that's like 3 weeks old and that's, doesn't have any momentum, and say, hey, please write about me, people are going to go, I don't know about that. Right. You're kind of just saying, here's my dirty underwear. Why don't you wear them? No one wants to do that. But if you come to them beforehand and you give them the scoop, and you say, hey, this is going to come out and this is why it's so cool and here's who's involved and it's going to be amazing. And we've, grown this, Twitter following from 0 to 10,000 in the last 3 months and everyone loves it. And here's what a couple people on Twitter had to say, right? Mm-hmm. Now there's some excitement built into it. Let's talk about bloggers real quick too, because bloggers aren't journalists. So bloggers, unlike, someone at the New York Times, they don't have a salary. Right. So how they make their money is people pay them to write what are called, quote unquote, sponsored posts. OK, so a sponsored post, depending on the size of the blog, is anywhere between $75 to $500. Typically, they're around $200 to $250 a piece. OK. Now, the trick to this is if you have the money, pay it, because it's a lot easier to do that and it's less brain damage. But if you don't have, a few $100 or $1,000 laying around where you can pay, 5 of the top bloggers, get creative on things that you can do with them and with their community. So can you offer them, exclusive experiences? Can you give them sneak peeks? Can you have them run a contest and you're going to give them the full box set of your films? Can you have a contest where they're going to meet the developer or the director and, you're going to fly them out to LA or something, right? Mm-hmm. So contests work really well. Giveaways work really well. Reviews and exclusive experiences work really well. And if all else fails, give them cash.
Yeah. Good old cash always seems to work sometimes, right?
It's crazy. It's like, it's like having a green card in El Paso, right? So next tool, Omgli, OMGILI.com. So what Omgli does, it stands for Oh My God, I Love It. It's a forum search. So forums are very influential because people are there to talk, right? They're there to talk and discuss. And if you can come and enter a forum and talk about your product or service, then, or in this case, your film, and give people like a link to a trailer, it really is a very beneficial thing. Now, forums can be time-sucking vampires, okay? Because you can sit there and just be talking to, someone in, I don't know, Ames, Iowa, who isn't going to give you $1 to save his life. But what it does do is it gets your content out there in a lot of different places and allows you to target specific conversations on forums. So if I go to OMGILI.com, and I'm just going to type in zombie films, okay?
Okay.
I'm going to hit search. And I got about 2,438 threads. Wow. Quite a bit, right? So what I could do is I could sit there and start going through all of these myself and telling people who I am and leave a link to my trailer and a sign-up page where people to leave their email address. Or if I can tweak the message enough to get it right, what I could do is hire an intern or hire somebody off of Odesk. So odesk.com for literally pennies and have them go through this entire list and leave a link with the message that I give them ahead of time.
Cool. And yeah, I'm going to link to that in the show notes too, all of these things.
What's that?
I'm going to link all this stuff in the show notes too.
Sure. Cool. Okay, cool. Let's talk about Twitter again. So Twitter allows you to tag people in images now. Did you know that?
Yeah, I actually somebody was tagging me in a couple images when I first realized it. They were actually doing a crowdfunding campaign.
Cool. So talk to me about your experience with that.
Basically, they had taken a photo of like a landing page, and they put it up there. They tagged a bunch of people in it, and basically, just to make people aware of the campaign, and were asking for the obligatory retweet and stuff like that. I don't know how much they got off of that, but I know they were doing a few times.
Yep. So, and they already had a live campaign?
Yes.
Yeah, worst thing to do, guys, right? Because did you have any relationship with these folks prior?
I actually knew the one person who was running the social media.
Okay, so you knew that one person. Most people don't know, and they just go out and tag people and mention people on Twitter saying, hey, we're live and we're making a show about zombies. Give us money, right? And then people are like, I have no clue who you are. Go screw yourself. But
exactly.
You want to think about this like Apple. And Apple, they have the launch down to an art and a science. So what is the first thing they do? First of all, they identify the influencers. They get product in the influencer's hands. So in this case, your trailer in the influencer's hands. The influencers talk about it and write about it and blog about it and tweet about it. And then they go back to those same influencers and they say, hey, guys, we're launching, so we're going to give you the scoop first, right? And then now they become that source of information that's only given to a certain select few for this particular iPhone or whatever, right? That's why all these little leaks come out. That's why all these little snippets of information with like Robert Scoble and some of these other really prolific bloggers. That's why there are these entryways to these markets, is because Apple's identified them as an influencer. So you can do the same type of thing. So if you guys have a really cool, super hot zombie movie and you got a really, well done trailer, reach out to these influencers. Tell them what it is you're doing. Tell them that, you'd like for them to, check your film out, blah, 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 right? And send them a link. Not all of them are going to respond, but, it's the numbers game, guys. So it's all about conversions, and you have to cast a wide enough net of relevant prospects in order to get the results you want. So, I've built a lot of sales and marketing teams with different startups. When I did cold calling, for Service Magic, and we basically, open up new markets, we were making 100 calls a day, talking to an average of 8 people, having 4 presentations, and closing 1 deal. So that's 8 hours of calling to close 1 deal. Okay. Mm-hmm. So if you guys think this is going to be easy, it's definitely not. But I'm telling you, if you get in with this network and you build it, it's one of those things that you own, right? You can take anything and run it through it and spit out money. So if you're a filmmaker and you connect with film influencers and you launch this movie, well, guess what's going to happen next time you launch your next movie? It's going to be exponentially easier because you're already going to have a base to start with.
Yeah, sorry, Eli. Actually, that's what I was saying too. You would obviously have that built-in fan base, and you have a built-in crowd to already work off of.
Yeah, look at Veronica Mars.
Yeah.
Rates off the cash, right? Why do you think she did that? Because she had a fucking fan base.
Yeah, very true. And I had a friend of mine who actually does his own web series. He actually crowdfunding his whole project in 1 day, just for the fan base of that one web series. They raised like $40K. Yep. I mean, hell, man, more power to them for that.
Right, because they took the time, they built the fan base, and it worked, right? So that's the biggest thing I need to tell people is start producing. You guys are you have a competitive advantage, everyone listening to this podcast, because what you have is the power of video. You can show people things, right? Most clients that I work with have a tech product, and they're super brilliant engineers, but they can't tell a story to save their life. So you guys are storytellers, and you know how to do video, right? Those are huge, huge weapons that, when utilized correctly on the web, can, literally topple governments and create millionaires overnight, as long as you do it. So find those influencers, tell your story, create, videos for content, distribute that content, and drive everyone back to a call to action, right? So you're either having that trailer on a page, and directly under that trailer, you're saying enter your email address, right? And then, of course, you're emailing that list every time you have a new little update come out. And then when it comes time for your launch, these people have got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 touch points with you, and they can't wait to back what it is you're doing, because now they feel a part of what you're doing, as opposed to just a passive consumer that's going to buy a DVD, watch it once, and it's going to go in the video cabinet.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's all about building that community and actually, not just seeing them, actually, coming to them and actually saying, engaging them prior, and, not just always just constantly marketing to them, which is, something we touched on before on the last show, which is when they, a lot of the common mistake that they saw too was in social media, people would just constantly tweet about their project, or they would, tweet to random people and like, hey, you have to check out our crowdfunding campaign. People would say like, who the hell are you guys?
Right.
And it just be all get lost in the shuffle.
Well, put it this way. So I got a buddy named Eric. I won't mention his last name in case he's a filmmaker. Actually, he's a filmmaker. But I hadn't seen this guy in 5, 6 years. We used to be roommates, really close friends. And then, life happens and you kind of get married and everyone goes their own separate ways, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I get a call out of the blue, and he says, hey, I haven't seen you forever. He goes, I'd like to have coffee with you and just catch up. And I was like, oh, man, absolutely. I haven't seen you forever. Miss you, buddy. Totally. Where do you want to do it? And he says, let's meet at this place at this time. And I said, great. So I show up, right, because it's my buddy. And he's got a friend sitting with him, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, and I kind of sit down, and he starts talking to me about this business opportunity and this multi-level marketing scheme, and this is his quote unquote upline manager that's going to make me a millionaire because of my network, right? And I just had this really bad taste in my mouth, and had he said, hey, I haven't seen you forever, kind of built that relationship up a little, and then said, even if you're not interested, could you do me a favor and you just come and tell me what you think about this? I would have gone. Absolutely. Because I have that relationship and, he's my buddy, right? Mm-hmm. So most people do the front, right? They don't take the time to prep the relationship and they go right in for the close, and it leaves a bad taste in everyone's mouth. You don't go out there and, screw a girl on the first date and try to marry her. Some people do, but I don't think it really works that well. You got to dance, right? You got to dance. You got to kind of wine and dine. You got to put the time in to know that that other person or persons know that you care about them and are committed to building a relationship with them. And I don't care if it's a relationship or it's building a fan base for your film. The mechanics are the same.
Oh, yeah, very good points. And, and I've learned that lesson too as I've launched my own projects, is that, it's something you touched on earlier, by the way, which was, somebody in I think you said Iowa who, won't donate at all when you talked about the forum hack. I actually had somebody who was from, I think, South Carolina, and this guy would constantly talk to me, never donated a dime, was always asking for stuff from me, and finally was asking for the Skype interview, and it was basically his pitch to be an actor. And I said, I forget his name. And I said, listen, buddy, I have so much going on right now. And, if you want to talk about this after this campaign is over, it was that this guy was just trying to waste my time every which way possible. And it's like, it's one of those people, I'm like, what, it's a good thing that, I weeded him out through email first, though.
Yep. Well, it's a time-sucking vampire, right?
Exactly.
And so to your point, he's never done anything for you. Right. So, we're all human. Right. So it's WIIFM. What's in it for me?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, when you're talking about, reaching out to these influencers and stuff, start by doing stuff for them to get on their radar, and it's not brown nosing, but, if mention them in a comment, tweet at them, with an infographic and say, hey, I found this online. I thought, you could benefit from it, right? Shoot them a trailer for, a film that's coming out that may or may not know about. Things like that kind of put you in as kind of like a resource, like, I'm not just here to suck off you or sponge off you. And when you build the relationship on that, it has a lot better, you can have a lot better results. that can also backfire, so beware. I have a reporter contact at the Wall Street Journal, and we've actually become buddies now. But when I first started doing this, I was like tweeting at her and sending her stuff like, "Hey, check this out. What do you think about this?" And right? And she's like, "Look, what's the agenda, right? Because you're just leaving all these comments and you're tweeting at me like a lot. Are you a stalker? What's going on?" And I just said, "Hey, no," and I kind of explained my rationale, right? And she's like, "Oh, okay." She goes, "Well, just come out and say it next time." But I've tried coming out and say it with these different reporters and bloggers, and I've had that not work as well. So do it the first way, but just be ready to defend your position and tell them what it is you're doing if challenged, and do it quickly.
And that's a very good point. And obviously, I think when I did mine, I had an initial email to various bloggers, and that sort of helped weed out like a lot of them who just weren't interested. So I didn't, constantly been like, what the hell is this guy constantly telling me about his video game thing for if we're not going to cover it? You know what I mean? So, yep. But yeah, that's a very good point too. And Eli, just again, I know we're getting close to an hour. I know. You have you have a lot of things going on. So, in closing, what are some of the best crowdfunding campaigns you've seen recently that you can think of?
Best crowdfunding campaigns that I've seen recently.
Yeah, whether it's one that you've done or one you saw maybe on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or GoFundMe.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. So, one of them that I really, really, really like is the Tile app. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
So the Tile, Tile app.com. It's a little electronics device. They crowdfunded over $1.5 million on their own website. And that's what I tell people too. It's like, crowdfunding, you don't have to put it on a platform. And you actually have a lot more leeway if you don't want to put it on a platform and just run on your own website. But they did a really, really good job of hosting the raise on their own website. They had a lot more leeway because what they did is they dropped what's called a retargeting pixel on their website. So they took out ads to drive people to their website. And then they took out ads and they said on Facebook, they said, only show this ad to people that have visited my website and that have seen this retargeting pixel, right? Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of information online. You can check it out. But it was a very, very clean and easy way to reach out to these people, and they got a lot of money out of it. The Coolest Cooler is another one. So that was a really cool one. They raised, I think it was $13 million.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
As a cooler project, and they did a practice that's common in PR, but he didn't do it the first time. But it's called trading up the ladder. So think about it like this. So let's just say you said, "Oh my God, with this zombie movie, I just want to get on the New York Times because as soon as everyone sees it, they're going to go bananas for it and everyone's just going to want to watch this thing," right? And that may or may not be the case. But you trying to approach the New York Times right off the bat with no network, no community, no traction, no nothing is probably not going to work most times. I'm not saying never because I've had it happen, but most of the time it's probably not going to. So mainstream media, their main concern is one thing, and what it is, it's reputation. They want to talk about things that are really cool, but they're only going to talk about things that are really cool if they know that they're reputable. And the way they find out they're reputable is to see if they have traction. Okay? So trading up the ladder is going to a niche blog who isn't necessarily worried about reputation, but just wants something really cool and hot and fresh to talk about. Pitching it to them, getting coverage there, and then taking that niche blog piece and then channeling it up, saying, "Hey, New York Times, I know that blah, 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 blah. You've written about campaigns in the past on zombie films. Here's one that you're going to love, and here's why. Oh, yeah, and P.S., DaveBullisFilms.com just wrote about us. Here's a link to what he had to say." Do you see how I built that credibility in there?
Yeah, I did.
That strategy, I use the same thing to have one-on-one meetings with Steve Wozniak, with Jimmy Wales from Wikipedia, 8 international presidents in Central and South America. And every time I would ask for an interview, I would say, "Hey," or a meeting, I would say, "Hey, here's who I am, here's what I do. Here's what I want to meet with you about. And by the way, here's some of the people I've worked with in the past with some links. And 9 times out of 10, I got the meeting. Always. Wow. I mean, the only time I wouldn't get the meeting is if they had something going on and, they just couldn't schedule it within the time frame I needed. So very, very, very powerful practice. Another one is called Spark Core. And I'm sorry, I just don't, I haven't done films. So everything I'm looking at is mostly like consumer technology type stuff. But
that's fine.
The mechanics are the same, guys. Spark Cores is one to where they didn't really understand their market and they really didn't understand their message. So the guy's name is Zach Zapula, and Zach had an idea to basically make these Wi-Fi controlled light bulbs to where you can make them turn different colors using LEDs, and then you can turn them off and on with your smartphone. Okay, kind of cool. But they're expensive, and there's a limited market on people who are going to buy expensive light bulbs for their houses, mostly like bachelors throwing a bunch of house parties, right? So they, on a $250,000 target, they raised $125,000 and they ended up failing. And that's a big failure, right? When you raise $125,000 and you're only halfway to your target, I mean, that's a big slap in the face, right?
Yeah.
I mean, most people I know would be tickled shitless to raise $100,000, much less raise 125 and still fail. So they had 2 options. They could quit, or they could really kind of go back to the drawing board and think about this. And what they surveyed their backers, and what they found was people really liked the whole Wi-Fi component. Like, you could just hook this thing up to Wi-Fi and control your lights going off and on, right? Mm-hmm. And they said, well, what if we just sold the chip, the little Wi-Fi chip? And then instead of light bulbs, people could wire it up to their own light bulbs. They could wire it up to their thermostat. They could do whatever with it, right? It's just the chip. They put, I think it was a $50,000 target, maybe even less. Maybe it was 10. I think it was 10. I think it was $10,000 is what they were asking for, and they raised $650,000. So that right there, guys, is really the true nature and the true beauty of crowdfunding. Because in the old days, what would happen is Dave Bullis has an idea for a Wi-Fi sensor to control light bulbs, right? And he goes out and he spends all this money. He has a warehouse full of these bastards. And guess what? They're not selling. And the stores that bought some, they're not reordering. So what does Dave do? Dave liquidates all this as best he can, chalks up a loss, and gets divorced and tries to rebuild his life. That's the old days. The new days allows you to say, hey, we're going to take a limited risk on Kickstarter for little to no money at all, see what the market thinks, and then from there, if they love it, we can carry on. If they don't, we have 2 choices. We can retool and redo, or we can just move on to the next thing.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And that's sort of like it's also testing your idea, like you just said. And a couple producers I know have also done that, where they've sort of tested out an idea, and so that way they can say, okay, if it fails, maybe the idea wasn't fully thought of yet, or maybe something wasn't right, and then we can retool it and sort of go back.
Yep. And even if you have a successful crowdfunding campaign, guys, you want to look at 2 things. One is the engagement level of the backers, right? Are people like excited and they're just ecstatic about this? And the other is the velocity of the campaign. Is this thing taking off, right? Mm-hmm. Do you have like a little hockey stick up and to the right? And if it's just like a very long, low plateau, you could still reach your goal, but it maybe says that you're just not really there as far as your message and as far as the market and how much of a market really wants what you have.
Yeah, and also, do you also look at like Facebook likes and retweets and everything else, Eli, when you analyze these campaigns?
I mean, yes and no. I mean, I look at Facebook likes and retweets as kind of like, I test it on messaging, right? Mm-hmm. So I say, I'll throw out different messages in there and kind of see which ones are getting retweeted or which one people are resonating with the most. And then I use that messaging in the campaign. Mm-hmm. But as far as like, I mean, I don't give a shit if someone retweets me. I want them to give me some money, right? If my campaign's live. So if they're not giving me money, that means 2 things. 1, either they just really don't like what I have, or 2, it's just I haven't explained it clearly enough where they see a value of what's in it for them. And buying a DVD isn't necessarily a lot of value, guys.
True, and then the last people we had on, Trigonis and Michael Doherty, they actually was talking about that as well, and just building value throughout your campaign with the perk structure, and also what perks you're even going to donate, and what you can actually make of value, and what like Trigonis always says, a 3D perk, which is something you can actually use a lot of, and it also ties in with whatever you're making. In this case, if we did a film, a 3D perk, something we could actually use, and not just like a T-shirt, but something like he listed some of them. I can't think of them off the top of my head, but I think you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, like if it's a zombie film, I don't know, it's like maybe it's a signed, mini battle axe by the staff or the crew, right? Yeah. And you're going to put it on your desk at work, and it's kind of one of those things that everyone's going to ask you about, and you talk about how you were, contributed to this film. There was an indie band up in Canada who the obvious thing when you're making music, and films too, right, is to sell the music, or in this case, to sell the film, right? Right. But they knew that they were going to have to sell quite a lot of CDs when people don't buy music anymore. It's way easier to steal it these days to really get any type of velocity. So they said, we need to basically turn every person that we know into our biggest cheerleader. So they said, okay, here's what we're going to do. They had already booked an international tour to open up for this tour for these bands. They were an indie band, and they're only looking to raise $30,000. And so they said, listen, whoever refers the most traffic to our campaign, we're going to take you on an international tour for a year. All expenses paid. You just got to fly your ass to, I think it was like Ontario. Okay? Yeah. And provide spending money. So on a $30,000 target, they ended up raising close to $300,000. Because everyone wanted to be a rock star for a year for an all-expense paid experience, right? Yeah. I don't care if I got to run around and just carry speakers. If I can go on tour for a year with a rock band internationally, that's an experience that you can't buy and very easily replicate, right? It's a life changer. So that struck a chord with the fan base, and that fan base turned into the cheerleaders, and those cheerleaders really is what drove that exposure. So even though they didn't have a lot of mainstream media to begin with, people started picking it up on the tail end because they were talking about this little indie band that's raising all this money because people wanted to be a rock star.
Very cool. And that is a very good idea, too. And I can definitely see why they ended up raising $300,000. Yeah. Yeah. One of the best campaigns I've ever seen, Eli, is this girl actually made a USB shot glass. And what it was is you actually had a shot glass, but you pulled off the side, and it would still maintain the shot glass structure, but it was a USB, and you could plug it in, and it was her whole album. So you could actually drink along to these songs that she had about taking shots.
Hold on, say that again?
So you could actually drink along, because it was like drinking game songs, and you would drink along to her songs as it played through the USB you put into your computer, or if you had a sound system like that could take USB. So she ended up raising, I think, well over $100,000 for this.
Wow. So yeah, it's totally innovative, right? So she's got drinking songs. She ties the perks in, something fun and cool that, people don't have or haven't seen before. I mean, the go-to is the lazy thing is here's a T-shirt. Okay, well, that sucks, right? So, you know what's also cool though too? Is digital perks. So I raised it's like $26,000 for this little nonprofit that very, very small. I mean, they'd only been around for like a year. They wanted to raise money. They wanted to raise $25,000 for 5 nonprofits, and they didn't have really they had no budget. They had less than no budget. And they didn't really have anything to give away. They couldn't even afford T-shirts if they wanted to, right? Yeah. So I said, okay, well, let's focus on digital goods that have high value to different markets. So do you know who Seth Godin is?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. So we reached out to Seth. Said, Seth, we would like you to be a part of this campaign, and it's all we're asking for you is to support end sex trafficking by providing some of your digital goods in exchange for people backing the campaign. It's not going to cost him any money, right? Because it's all digital, but it has his name attached to it. right? So now there's instant credibility baked in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
So we got him on board, and then we just went to other New York Times bestselling authors and did the same thing. We got authors to give books and da-da-da-da-da. So all these just digital goods. And then I said, well, hey, what is it about this campaign, that's cool? And they said, well, this and that and that. And I said, well, if I'm a high net worth individual, and if I were to give someone $1,000, I don't want a t-shirt. I don't want junk. I want something that looks good that I can display somewhere. And they said, well, we don't have money for any like plaques or anything. And I was like, well, what about making like a really nice looking certificate and put some exclusivity on it? Call it the 100 Club. So it's 100 people are only going to have this certificate saying that you're one of the 100 people committed to ending sex trafficking. And someone can hang it in their office, right? We got like 5 people to back that perk and give $1,000 for a piece of paper.
Yeah, like Trigonus and Michael and Doherty said, that's sort of like it's air because it's not a cost to you. But that's really cool though that you were able to do these digital perks.
Yeah, and you can do the same. It's just a matter of what the value is, right? Because it always comes down to value. Who is it that you're talking to? What do they ideally want, and then how can you give it to them at the lowest cost to you, the highest value to them, so it has the best return for your campaign?
Absolutely, and that's a wonderful tie-in to everything you just talked about, everything you just discussed. With and I'm sure Eli, I know everyone has learned a lot here. So as I know I have. So in closing, is there a final word you have on everything, or did you just, or is that pretty much tied in already? Yeah.
So, anyone has any questions, as long as they're not, 5 pages long, I'm always willing to, give advice and critique. You can always email me at eli@madhatteragency.com. I do have a crowdfunding course that I sell online. I got about 5,000 students that have gone through it to date. It's on udemy.com for $1,000. But anytime I do an interview, I always give a coupon out. So if you guys want to take my crowdfunding course, I'll give you a $19 coupon. You're not going to find that anywhere else. Just email me, say you want the $19 course, and I'll send you guys a link. And, happy crowdfunding. I mean, you guys are on, the cutting edge of innovation. And, I wish you guys all the best of luck for the campaigns. And thank you, Dave, for having me. Oh, and my pleasure. I'm going to also link your email address, and also everyone, that is a coupon to get the entire course for $19. So instead of paying me $1,000, it's just $19, and that's well over 99% off. So that's a great value, and I urge everyone, if you really are interested in getting it with Eli and that nitty gritty of what he talked about, these hacks, that's a pretty good value. And also, Eli, is there a website people can visit you at? Yeah, it's just madhatteragency.com, and Mad Hatter like the Alice in Wonderland character.
Cool. And then on Twitter, you're at Eli_Regalado. Sorry,
Regalado.
Regalado. I'm sorry, I butchered your last name again. I am so sorry.
No worries.
And Eli, thank you so much for coming on, and thank you for spending an hour with me. I'm sure, I know we sort of went over time. And everyone, you can find me at davebullis.com, and Twitter, I'm at Dave_Bullis. And again, next week, we're going to be having on another crowdfunding guest. It's the CEO of FundHub. It's Kendall Almerico. I think I probably butchered his last name as well.
Almerico.
Almerico. See, there you go. I'm butchering everyone's last name, so it's not just you, Eli.
No worries. Yeah, and Kendall's awesome. So you guys will have a good time with him.
Cool, and he's funny. So his Facebook status updates always literally crack me up.
Right.
But if it makes you feel better, Eli, people have butchered my last name for some unknown reason. My high school graduation, the assistant principal called out my name wrong, and I was like, "Is that me?" And so she actually called me. I think she called me like Bullis or something, or Bullos, and I was like, man, it just it looks exactly like it spells. So it's fun. It's funny stuff, Eli. It's just sometimes they overthink it. But again, Eli, thank you so much for coming on. And this will be up next Tuesday, which is the 13th. And I'm gonna make sure to link everything in the show notes to everything we discussed.
Excellent. Well, it's been a pleasure, Dave. You have a great night.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. And take care, Eli.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
Find Dave at davebullis.com. Please make sure to subscribe and share the podcast.